Hey there! Welcome back to Color and Craft Haven, a little corner of calm where we can slow down, breathe, and add a little color to the day. Have you ever noticed that folding a simple sheet of paper can be oddly satisfying? You start with something completely flat and ordinary, make a few careful folds, and suddenly your brain decides this is the greatest entertainment it has experienced all week. It doesn't matter whether you're making a paper crane, a little box, a bookmark, or you're just absent-mindedly folding a receipt while waiting for the microwave to finish. Somehow, it scratches an itch you didn't even know you had. Today we're talking about why that happens and why our brains seem to adore precision, repetition, and tiny victories that involve absolutely no batteries. At first glance, folding paper seems ridiculously simple. You're not painting a masterpiece. You're not carving marble. You're not wrestling with a complicated machine that comes with 14 instruction booklets and 3 mysterious screws left over at the end. You're simply taking a flat object and changing its shape. Yet our brains often treat that process as something deeply rewarding. Every fold has a purpose. Every crease creates progress. There isn't much uncertainty once you know what you're making, and that predictability is surprisingly comfortable. Life is full of unfinished business and confusing emails and socks that mysteriously vanish in the laundry. Paper, thankfully, behaves most of the time. One reason folding feels so good is that precision gives our brains a clear objective. Line this edge up with that edge. Press firmly along the crease. Repeat. These are tiny, achievable goals that provide immediate feedback. If the edges meet, congratulations, you've succeeded. If they don't, your paper politely informs you without writing a strongly worded performance review. That kind of instant feedback is rare in everyday life. You can spend weeks cleaning the house and somehow still discover a dust bunny the size of a hamster hiding behind the couch. Paper is refreshingly honest. It either lines up or it doesn't, and your brain appreciates that level of straightforward communication. Repetition also plays a huge role in why folding feels calming. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures. We naturally look for rhythms and routines because they reduce uncertainty. Folding paper often involves repeating nearly identical motions over and over again. Fold, press, turn, fold again. Before long, your hands know what they're doing without needing much conscious thought. It's a bit like walking along a familiar trail. You aren't constantly wondering where to step next because your brain already has the map. That frees up mental space, allowing stress levels to drop while your hands quietly continue their little paper adventure. There's also something incredibly satisfying about transforming ordinary materials into something unexpected. A plain square of paper doesn't look particularly exciting. It has all the charisma of an unpaid utility bill. But after a series of careful folds, suddenly it's become a flower, a bird, or a decorative box. Our brains love transformation because it creates a visible sense of accomplishment. You didn't simply look at the paper. You changed it. Every fold becomes proof that your actions matter, even in a small way. That's surprisingly powerful when much of modern life happens on screens where progress often feels invisible. Precision itself can be deeply relaxing because it demands just enough attention to keep distracting thoughts from barging in. If your mind starts wandering toward tomorrow's grocery list halfway through a careful fold, there's a good chance your edges won't quite match. So your attention gently returns to the paper, not because anyone forced it to, but because the task quietly invited it back. It's mindfulness without needing to sit perfectly still while wondering whether you're actually doing mindfulness correctly. The paper doesn't judge your meditation technique. It simply asks you to pay attention for one more fold. Many people describe repetitive creative hobbies as almost meditative, and paper folding fits beautifully into that category. The movement becomes rhythmic. Your breathing often slows even without you noticing. Your shoulders gradually unclench after spending the entire morning pretending they wanted to live somewhere near your ears. These physical changes are subtle, but they contribute to the feeling of calm. It's amazing how often our bodies hold tension until we become absorbed in a simple activity. Apparently, folding paper is one of the gentlest ways to convince your muscles that no, we're not being chased by a saber-toothed tiger today. Mistakes are also fascinating when it comes to paper folding. A slightly crooked crease usually isn't the end of the world. In fact, many projects still turn out surprisingly well despite tiny imperfections. That's an encouraging lesson because creativity isn't about flawless execution. It's about continuing anyway. Of course, there are moments when one incorrect fold creates what can only be described as modern geometric interpretive art. Suddenly, your elegant swan resembles an exhausted potato wearing a hat. But even those moments often become funny rather than frustrating, especially once you realize everyone who folds paper has created at least one legendary disaster. Another reason paper folding feels rewarding is that it offers closure. So many tasks in daily life never seem truly finished. You answer one email and receive three more. You wash the dishes and somehow another coffee mug appears from another dimension. Creative projects, however, often have a clear ending. You make the final fold, smooth the last crease, and you're done. Your brain gets to celebrate completion, which is psychologically satisfying. That feeling of, I finished something today, is more valuable than we sometimes realize, particularly during busy or stressful seasons when progress can otherwise feel difficult to measure. There's an interesting balance between challenge and simplicity as well. Folding paper requires enough concentration to stay engaging, but not so much that every moment feels mentally exhausting. Psychologists often talk about activities that are just challenging enough to hold our attention without overwhelming us. That's a sweet spot where many people experience what's sometimes called a state of flow. Time begins to pass differently. You look up expecting 10 minutes to have gone by, only to discover you've somehow spent 45 minutes enthusiastically arguing with a perfectly innocent sheet of paper. Time flies when you're negotiating with geometry. The sounds involved deserve special consideration too. The soft rustle of paper, the crisp little snap of a firm crease. Even smoothing a fold with your fingertips produces tiny sensory experiences that many people find comforting. We don't often think about sound as part of creative hobbies, but gentle, predictable noises can contribute to relaxation. Compare that with accidentally dropping a box of markers onto a hardwood floor, which creates a sound resembling an explosion in a rainbow factory. One experience lowers your blood pressure. The other causes you to briefly question every life decision that led you to that moment. There's also something wonderfully accessible about paper. It doesn't require fancy equipment or years of experience before you can enjoy it. Beginners and experienced creators alike can appreciate the simple pleasure of making careful folds. That accessibility removes a lot of performance pressure. Nobody expects your very first folded creation to be displayed in a museum beside priceless historical treasures. If it looks charming, fantastic. If it looks slightly confused, that's perfectly respectable too. Creativity becomes less about proving your talent and more about enjoying the process, which is often where the greatest benefits are hiding anyway. Paper folding reminds us that slowing down isn't wasted time. In a world constantly encouraging us to move faster, answer quicker, and multitask until our brains resemble browser windows with 73 open tabs, choosing to focus on one simple activity can feel almost rebellious. Each fold asks you to pause for a moment. Line things up carefully. Be present. Continue. That steady rhythm encourages patience in a surprisingly practical way. It's difficult to rush precision, and perhaps that's exactly why it feels so refreshing. Sometimes our minds simply need permission to move at the speed of a carefully folded corner. Humor also has a way of sneaking into the process. Every experienced paper folder has confidently announced, "This is going perfectly," moments before accidentally folding the wrong side. Somehow, the paper has an incredible ability to humble us without being mean about it. One second, you're imagining elegant precision worthy of a grand demonstration. The next, you're holding something that appears to have been folded by an enthusiastic squirrel wearing oven mitts. Thankfully, creative hobbies remind us that laughing at ourselves is part of learning. A sense of humor may not improve your folds directly, but it makes the journey more enjoyable. Perhaps the biggest lesson paper folding teaches us is that satisfaction often comes from small, repeated actions rather than dramatic moments. One fold isn't particularly impressive. Neither is the next one. But together they gradually become something meaningful. That's true of creativity in general. Tiny steps accumulate into finished projects. Small improvements become noticeable skills. Gentle practice builds confidence over time. The same principle applies well beyond paper. Progress is usually quieter than we expect, arriving one careful crease at a time, instead of with fireworks and a marching band carrying a giant banner announcing that you've officially become magnificent. That's it for today's colorful time. I'd love to hear whether you've ever had one of those wonderfully satisfying paper folding moments, or whether you've accidentally invented a completely new geometric life form along the way. So share your story in the comments. Take care, stay creative, and I'll see you in the next one.